Resource development. In addition to this legislative framework, resource development is on aggressive fast forward. And their policy think tanks have said, make no mistake, we're going to lay the pipes and we're going to mine those minerals if we have to send in the army. And Canadians are terrified. They have no idea what's going to happen. I think we can make a call to Canadians that we are their last and best hope of saving this planet. But here's a fly in the ointment in trying to rally the troops, in trying to work with First Nation leaders and community members. We have a very strong and growing anti-First Nation right-wing media. And they focus on some very particular sore spots to keep us divided. One, that all of our leaders are corrupt, and that their corruption is the reason for our poverty. Not the 200 years of colonization and residential schools and stealing our lands and killing our children in residential schools, or the forced sterilizations of our women, or the smallpox blankets, or the scalping laws. No, none of that's the reason for our poverty. But it's somehow these corrupt leaders who make $36,000 a year on average. And you know, if that's the argument, if leaders aren't allowed to live high on the hog while their people suffer, why is it that Harper lives in a free mansion and homelessness is on the rise in Canada? It's not apply to both, right? Think about it that way. But what this does is this is how our kids are learning. Think of social media and Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube. What are they hearing about themselves? Right? That we're all incompetent, that we don't know what's going on, that our leaders are making deals, that our leaders don't know what they're doing, they're disconnected from their community members. That works. We now have a country full of disillusioned community members, some rightfully so, right? But we have all been in this colonization project. What do the leaders do? They administer the Indian Act as they are told, or they don't get funding for social assistance, education, and housing. Would you ask them to say, no, government, I'm not going to implement the Indian Act anymore and have your funding cut? A First Nation did that once. They lasted 3 months until people had no food to eat. We are in a situation of duress. And the sooner we all work together, leaders and community members, and fight the real enemy, the sooner we're actually going to turn this ship around. Because right now we're in crisis mode. We have a housing crisis, water crisis, child and family service crisis, prison crisis, food insecurity crisis, but we're only in crisis mode. Let them do what it is that they want to do, and we will be in disaster management mode. So when are we going to act? Now, while we have at least some capacity, or after, when we're trying to pick up the pieces? And I say the time to act is now. Because I have been saying for 2 years now that their conservative plan is to implement all of this legislation against our wills, assimilate us into the population, repeal the Indian Act, break up reserves, and cut our funding. And that is exactly what they have been doing. So the fact that we have been trying to be nice and extending the olive branch and trying to work hard and not make waves has not saved anybody from the funding cuts. They have more stages of funding cuts to come because the ultimate objective is zero money for political organizations and zero money for communities. These are going to be phased in over time. Whether you kiss Harper or punch him in the mouth, these funding cuts are coming. Would you rather be kissing Harper or standing up for yourself? And I say let's stand up for ourselves. Because here's the option. Either we decide what's going to happen in our territories and our people, or these people will. These are our saviors. These are the people who know what's best for the poor little Indians, right? And every single solution that has ever come from a government, every single piece of legislation, every policy idea and brain cramp they've ever had has resulted in disaster for us. Why on earth would we put the fate of our 7 generations into their hands? Right? That's our job. Just like the treaties are going to be in existence as long as the sun shines and the river flows, so too are our responsibilities to protect our future generations. So this part I usually just give to chiefs, but I can share it with you just really quickly. When I'm talking to chiefs, I say, listen, we kind of have 3 options here. We can do nothing. We can do our standard approach to handling things, or we can come up with a coordinated strategic plan. The do-nothing approach is actually pretty easy. Just keep going until it's full. You essentially say, funding cuts? Okay, they only look like 10%, we'll just adjust our budgets. Let's just plan to lay off staff. Let's wait and see what happens with the legislation. Maybe it won't be so bad. Maybe if we're nice to the federal government, you know, they'll give us program options. Then there's the standard approach, which is just a little bit stronger. You let AFN deal with everything, right? That's an option. Or we can send very strongly worded letters to the minister, because we all know where those letters go, right? We can request meetings with the minister. I mean, these are pretty standard approaches when the government does something that we don't like. We can just say, okay, let's just submit proposals to the government based on whatever direction it is they want us to move in and hope for the best. Or we can go to option number 3, which is a coordinated strategic plan of all of us. So identify like-minded First Nation leaders and community members to get together and say, how are we going to handle this? The first mistake people make is that you think everybody has to be on board. Everybody in your community has to agree, or all 615 chiefs have to agree. That's not how revolutions get started. Revolutions get started by people who know their rights, they're secure in their sovereignty and treaty rights, and they say, we're going to stand up for our people. And the thing about doing that, it's hard to be the person who goes first. But once you do go first, people will follow you. People will be inspired. And that's part of our job as leaders, both as political leaders and elder leaders and women and youth leaders, to inspire our people to action and say, this is done. This all stops today. And we have the means by which to do it. We're not completely cut off in funding yet. We can piggyback on meetings. We can do things like this. Now you can use social media and spread the word to other people. Post YouTube videos. We can, first of all, inform our members about what's happening. You have to know what's happening in order to know how to face it head on, right? Think of any military engagement. You have to know your enemy. Well, we know what's happening now. Then we have to come up with a plan, an end game that everyone can agree on. Leave all of the bullcrap politics behind, whether you like your chief or your counselor or your neighbor or your brother or your, like, none of that matters in a battle with Canada to protect your treaty rights and lands. And here's the bad news. Just like with the 1969 white paper, you don't have a year to think about it, folks. It has got to happen now, before the legislation, before the funding cuts. There's just no option. We have to go on an offensive, and I'm sorry if I keep saying we. I know I'm not from this territory, so I say it with the greatest of respect. It's like this really bad habit. But we have to deal with it now, and we have to support one another in doing it. Lots of time to fight all the old politics later. You can always vote your chief out if you don't like your chief, but the big battle here before us now involves everybody. If we leave anybody out, it's not going to work. And there's ways in which we can do it. There's so many things that we can do. been talking to First Nations all across the country, especially the treaty territories, who are all of the same mind, that we have got to oppose what's happening, put it on the record, and then have a strategic coordinated plan to educate the public, educate ourselves, and a process for escalating. So we extend our hand and say, government, we're done with this. Would you like to work with us? If not, there's another level that we will go to, and then another level, and then another level, until they get the message, our lands are not for sale. Our people are not to be imprisoned. Our kids are not to be stolen and put in child and family services. And we should be the first to benefit from our lands and resources, not the last. And if I have anything to say about it, China won't be getting our resources anytime soon either. So here it is. Just in case you didn't recognize it, here's what we're united against. Not one another, not on and off reserve, not traditional, non-traditional, leader, community member. We are united against the White Paper 2012 and their attempts to destroy our communities. And if we can stay focused, then it'll be easy going forward. So if you have any questions, happy to answer them all day long until my flight. So that's it.